Sierra Leone is a small West African nation that has endured more than its share of war and hardship. Most Americans are barely aware of it, but thanks to Reverend Dick Simpson, children at Wellington Avenue United Church of Christ in Chicago know a lot about this country, its needs, and what it means to be of service to others. Let's welcome Reverend Dick Simpson, who got the kids involved for his Books for Africa project. He's a professor of political science at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and co-editor of the new book, African Democracy and Development. Welcome to you. Thank you for being here, Reverend.
My pleasure, Bo.
Can you start off by framing for us the history of Sierra Leone and how it got into such turmoil?
Well, Sierra Leone got its independence back in the 1960s, so it's had its long period of independence. But then it, in the 1990s, began a civil war. So from 1992 to 2001, a whole decade was eaten up with a civil war. The civil war was so bad that a third of the people had to flee. More than 10,000 people had their limbs amputated. We had child soldiers. This is the place where Blood Diamond was made, the movie. It was a brutal war. The capital city was sacked twice. And so much of the infrastructure of the country was also devastated. And one of those aspects of that is all the schools and libraries were burned.
Walk us through your involvement over the years and how you first became interested in wanting to help there.
Well, I first went to Liberia as part of a YMCA movement when I was in college, and we built a YMCA. Unfortunately, it was destroyed in the Liberian War. I then went to Sierra Leone and did my dissertation research in the late 1960s, 66. And then for a long time I switched to American politics and urban politics and the problems here, and left Sierra Leone behind. And when the Civil War ended, I was very concerned. When I was there, it looked like Sierra Leone, with a two-party nation, was on the right track. Things were looking good for the country. I wanted to know what went wrong. So I went back to Sierra Leone in 2008. I discovered that. But then I wanted to know, well, will it do better in the future? And in the meantime, I went to the university library, which was not sacked, and looked and saw they hadn't bought a new book in 20 or 30 years. There's been a lot written in 20 or 30 years in every field, chemistry, psychology, nursing, whatever. We know a lot more than we knew 30 years ago. And they need books. And I started providing individually books to the university library. And then I discovered this wonderful group called Books for Africa. And we have since sent 4 containers of 22,000 books per container back to Sierra Leone. Wellington Avenue Church was the original fiscal agent for the first shipment. And this last shipment, the children at Wellington helped raise the books. They raised 300 books at the University of Illinois. We transferred that into 3,000 books. When it got to Atlanta to go to the final shipping with the books we raised from the rest of the country, it was 22,000. We've since this very month, they're sending another container. And our money, we really have a problem right now more with the money than we do with the books. We're happy to get the books, but it costs a lot to distribute the books up country in Sierra Leone. The roads aren't very good. The transportation's expensive. It's expensive to pay the port fees. So for every shipment we send, we have to raise $5,000 just to distribute them at the other end. So our biggest need at the moment is still to get the books, but also to get the money to be able to distribute them up country.
Mm-hmm. Beyond the obvious impact of learning and sharing of ideas, what kind of impact is the Books for Africa project having on students and young people in Sierra Leone?
Well, if people go to the Books for Africa website, they can see for all the countries some of the impacts and some of the stories. But it can make the difference of, think of a school with nothing on the bookshelf. And in some cases, not even the books they need to hold class. This can make the difference of a working school and a non-working school. This can make the difference of a child that moves forward in literacy rapidly or has nothing to read and can't move forward rapidly in literacy and does just rote learning in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So even though it's a small part of what has to be done for Sierra Leone to restart it as a society and move it as a democracy, you can't have a democracy if you don't have a relatively literate people. And literacy in Sierra Leone is only 30%. 70% of the people are not literate. The unemployment rate for the youth is 70%. If you don't have skills and you can't make the right connections, and if you don't have the capital to build the kind of companies that are needed, then you don't have an economy. And it's just like in the inner city ghettos where kids are unemployed here. It's a bad situation. Doesn't lend to quite so much crime until the war happened, but it does lend to desperation and to wasted lives.
You have a very diverse background, from your academic work as a political scientist to being the 44th Ward alderman to being a reverend. How have all of your various work hats and contributions come into this new role as a motivator and leader for the Books for Africa project in Sierra Leone?
Well, I guess I would never have known myself about Sierra Leone if I hadn't studied it as a political scientist. We actually, when I was a graduate student, trained the first Peace Corps workers who went to Sierra Leone. I was in African Studies at the time at Indiana University. And we followed up with that. I was there for my dissertation and then lost track of Sierra Leone and its development for many decades in between. But I became concerned because of the Civil War. Everyone, I think, knew something about the brutal Civil War. And I wanted to find out what happened, and so I went back. And then when I found out and came back and did work in trying to develop a conference and develop a book and to try and say, well, what do we need to do to move forward for democracy and development, I found that reaching out with some of my organizing skills and using my home church, Wellington Avenue Church, as a base, proved very useful in trying to tie together these different aspects just to make something work. And it's worked marvelously well. It's not difficult. It's something anybody can do. But it helps perhaps that I've had these different skills and different contacts over the years.
How has the Books for Africa project been received on this side of the Atlantic, in schools and in academia? How have people responded to this call? Well,
I know mostly about the Sierra Leone effort. I'm in a network. I coordinate the containers that go to Sierra Leone. So I work with the returned Peace Corps workers, and we eliminated the Peace Corps during the war. So there haven't been Peace Corps workers until this last 2 years. Weren't Peace Corps workers for well over a decade. But nonetheless, a number of people did go to the Peace Corps and have come back. And there's a group of returned Peace Corps workers out of Seattle. There's a medical school down in Texas, a whole Philadelphia school district in the Allegheny area gave their entire collection of books that they no longer use for their classes. We're a network. People in Alaska sent computers.
It's fantastic work across the board. Coming even closer to home, you've involved the Wellington community and specifically youth from the Wellington United Church of Christ community in this project. What have they both contributed and what have they gained?
Well, you'll be talking to some of the children from the church and they can tell you what they've learned from it. But I think, you know, this is a place they didn't know anyone from, never met anyone from Sierra Leone. And they collected their books that they no longer felt like they needed at home, or they purchased some books. They raised 300 books from among the youth, and a couple of law professors and others contributed law books. They're a little bigger than what the children contributed with children's books. But the collection from Wellington was an important part of this last container that we sent. And it means a lot in Sierra Leone, and hopefully it gives the children at Wellington some idea about a very different part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Reverend Simpson, for being here today. I'm Bo River. For Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries, keep the faith.